Hey everyone, we've all been there, right? Staring down a truth that is absolutely undeniable, yet feeling this bizarre magnetic urge to just push it away. Well, today in this explainer, we're going on a really fascinating journey into the psychological mechanics of exactly why our minds naturally resist hard realities. And more importantly, we're going to decode this universal human experience together.
So let's kick things off with the question that literally frustrates us all. Why do we resist obvious truths? Think about those times when arguments with colleagues or loved ones just go in endless, maddening circles, despite the facts being laid out perfectly in front of them. It feels like they just aren't listening. But what if something entirely different, something highly protective, is actually happening under the surface?
Here's the core idea driving this entire explainer, and it's a massive paradigm shift. Quote, "People do not only evaluate truths for accuracy, they also evaluate them for cost." Once we really grasp this, we can move straight from frustration to empathy. Because we aren't just calculators crunching raw data. We are complex human beings, subconsciously calculating the emotional and social price of that data. Section 1. Why hard truths push back, and understanding that resistance.
You see, when a truth is difficult, it doesn't just sit there passively waiting for you to accept it. Imagine trying to open a really stiff steel gate in high humidity. It doesn't move just because you want it to, right? It only moves when enough force is applied, and it stubbornly resists before finally giving way. Hard truths press against something already holding shape inside our minds. It's not simply stubbornness, it's a calculated act of self-preservation.
Moving to Section 2, what the mind protects as it tries to stay intact. All right, here's a huge secret. The mind isn't mainly trying to be right, it's trying to stay intact. When a hard truth suddenly threatens to change our lives, the brain immediately deploys defenses for 5 core elements: identity, control, belonging, emotional stability, and mental effort. Understanding these 5 things is absolutely crucial to seeing the invisible walls that block out reality. First up is identity. Think of your identity like the heavy timber frame of a house. Now, you can repaint the walls without much trouble. That's kind of like learning a minor, harmless new fact. But if the frame itself is shaken, the whole house feels completely unsafe. Admitting we're wrong about something major can genuinely crack our foundational story of who we are. It feels like a direct, terrifying threat to our dignity rather than just a simple factual correction.
That brings us to our next 2 mental bodyguards: control and belonging. For control, we often prefer a flawed map over an unfamiliar reality because at least the flawed map feels predictable. It makes us feel like we're the ones steering. As for belonging, accepting a hard truth might force us to disagree with our community or our family. It's literally like pulling the plug on the shared electricity that keeps us warm. Humans are fundamentally built to belong, so the risk of social rejection makes the truth feel incredibly expensive. Finally, we have emotional stability and mental effort. Facing a hard truth is exactly like opening a window in a smoke-filled room. Yes, fresh air is deeply needed, but your eyes are going to sting first. Plus, changing core beliefs is exhausting work. It's like upgrading a city's old electrical wiring. The mind vastly prefers the old system simply because it's already running. So here's the absolute crucial takeaway from all this. What seems to be happening on the outside is that a person is just denying the truth or being completely irrational. But what's actually happening on the inside? Their mind is busy protecting their identity, avoiding psychological damage, and maintaining emotional stability. Resistance isn't stupidity. It is highly understandable, fiercely calculated self-defense.
Section 3. How hesitation becomes behavior, bridging the gap between thought and act.
So, what's actually happening in that messy gap between knowing a truth and admitting it out loud? When we hesitate, it isn't just a blank pause. It's the mind springing into frantic action. Picture a control room with multiple alarms sounding at once. One alarm yells, "Hey, this is accurate." But another screams, "This is painful." And a third warns, "This might cost you your social status." Hesitation is just the brain's desperate attempt to buy time and lower the total danger from all these alarms ringing at the exact same time. And that brings us to a really fascinating distinction between an abstract truth and a personal truth. Abstract truth is looking at data and saying, wow, this is probably serious. But personal truth changes the whole game. It says, if this is serious, then I must actively change something. Knowing a truth conceptually is fairly easy, but attaching it to the terrifying responsibility of personal action, that's where the cost becomes intensely real and exactly why we naturally hit the brakes.
So how does all this internal hesitation actually show up in the real world? Well, it morphs into 3 recognizable outward behaviors designed to soften the landing. We've got avoidance, reinterpretation, and partial acceptance. Let's look at each of these clever little defense mechanisms.
The most obvious one is avoidance. You stop reading the reports, you dodge the difficult questions, and it feels incredibly helpful in the short term because it successfully stops the immediate discomfort. But ironically, avoidance secretly feeds the problem in the background, massively increasing the very pressure you're trying so hard to escape.
Then we have reinterpretation. This is where the brain gets highly creative. Instead of rejecting the truth outright, it suddenly changes the meaning of the truth to fit its existing comfortable story. You'll hear phrases like, well, that was a one-time thing, or that doesn't really count. It's a clever way to twist reality just enough to protect our self-image from taking a direct hit.
And the third behavior is partial acceptance. This is a truly fascinating compromise the mind makes. A person accepts just enough of the truth to feel informed and relieve the sheer weight of total denial, but not quite enough to force them to actually change their life. They might nod and agree in conversation that there's a problem, but then quietly continue their exact old habits as if nothing happened at all.
Section 4. Truth versus mental defenses. The ultimate struggle.
Okay, so how does reality finally win out against our internal protections? Think of a thick dam holding back a ton of water. From the outside, someone's resistance looks totally solid. Then suddenly, they have a light bulb moment. But it wasn't actually sudden. It was the result of pressure building up until it was absolutely impossible to contain. Acceptance happens when the painful cost of denial finally exceed the uncomfortable costs of facing reality.
Let's put this into perspective with a totally relatable real-world situation. Imagine a family actively avoiding a conversation about an unsustainable household expense. They all sense the truth. Everyone knows the math just isn't mathing, but no one says it out loud. Why? Because speaking the truth would immediately shatter the emotional atmosphere of the home. It would force difficult choices and potential embarrassment. So they ignore the reality to temporarily protect the peace, choosing lower immediate pain over the desperately needed long-term clarity.
And that brings us to Section 5, the reorganization of acceptance and the clarifying shift it brings.
So what actually happens when that dam finally breaks? When we finally accept a hard reality, 3 amazing positive shifts occur. First, all that massive mental energy previously spent on maintaining denial is suddenly freed up for clear thinking. Second, the emotional load becomes honest. The exhausting pretending just stops. The pain might still be there, sure, but it's no longer distorted. And third, action finally becomes possible. Once reality is named clearly, our choices can finally match the world as it actually is.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. The next time someone resists the truth, or even when you catch yourself resisting it, will you ask, why won't they just listen? Or will you ask, what are they protecting? Shifting your mindset to that second question is the ultimate takeaway of this explainer. It replaces friction with patience and transforms your frustration into genuine empathy. Thanks so much for exploring the hidden mechanics of truth with me today.